Hey everyone, welcome back. This is part 3. Um, so we're currently at around 60 games. 100 games is roughly where I like to end things. I feel like after 100 games, you've ironed out at least 97 to 98 of the cards in the deck. Maybe one or two are still potentially flex. Um, but you're at the point where the list is pretty optimized and tuned and consistent and doing what you want it to do. But there have been a significant number of changes since the last video, and I'm going to cover them here. So the first one is Vesuvan Duplimancy. Uh, I should mention that in the list of mana, or the count of land in the deck, I should say, has now gone up. So previously we were at 31. That felt a little tight, uh, and I'm currently now at 32. It's possible that 32 is actually incorrect, and that so previously we had what 31 with one of or 31 and then a Valakut Awakening. I've actually just straight up gone to 32 at this point. I don't think that casting the Valakut Awakening has ever felt good to me. There have been times where it has gotten me something or a better hand, I should say, but I think that was kind of obscuring the fact that what we needed was just more card draw, or rather more value in general. And so I did end up cutting the Valakut Awakening, and then um, we've just gone up to 32 lands. However, the cut I've listed here is not specifically Valakut Awakening. Rather, if you think about it, the stuff on the left here that I've cut doesn't necessarily correlate one-to-one to the stuff on the right. It's just a list of things I've cut and then a list of things I've added. So Vesuvan Duplimancy, it did allow us to create clones, which would allow us to sort of combo off without needing Twin Flame or Heat Shimmer exactly, because it would always give us another clone in order to you know mutate Vadrok onto. So specifically, the combo I'm talking about is where uh, let's see here. It's where you would play something that um, that you can mutate onto. So, let's say Cloud of Fairies is an example, and then you target Cloud of Fairies with the Vadrok, and then if you had Vesuvan Duplimancy already in play, you wouldn't actually need the Twin Flame. You'd already get a copy of Cloud of Fairies, and then you could snap both those back, cast Vadrok again, or cast another Cloud of Fairies, because it's essentially free, and then cast Vadrok targeting the clone Cloud of Fairies, which makes another Cloud of Fairies clone, and then snap that back. Um, and then, but part of the reason why I wanted to cut Vesuvan Duplimancy is one, there's a number of games where casting it doesn't really do anything. So without the combo in hand, you cast Vesuvan Duplimancy, it's a 4 mana, it does nothing. And the real issue with that is that Vesuvan Duplimancy also kind of screams combo piece. And so playing Vesuvan Duplimancy and then passing, because oftentimes you didn't really have anything else to do, just doesn't seem like that good of an idea. Plus, you would much rather have Twin Flame anyway, because if you think about this loop here that we're creating Infinite Storm, and we are also creating infinite tokens. But the tokens don't have haste, which means that if we're not actually using the Twin Flame, then we are liable just to get board wiped, and then our loop here that went infinite stormed into nothing. Essentially, it just stormed into infinite tokens without haste, and so I felt like Vesuvan Duplimancy is just not worth it. And specifically, what I've listed here is the cut was just adding another land, but really it's more like Valakut Awakening was swapped for another land. Here I'll just do this. Tidal Barracuda. Actually, we'll put that up here, and then we'll just say that this was actually the swap. So Tidal Barracuda is an interesting one because it gives us protection. It's kind of a risky choice, but what I was originally thinking was something like Mural. So Mural Shield of Argive does give us uh, protection from almost everything, except maybe like a channel land. But it's also a human, so in a deck that is already struggling to find mutate targets, I felt like having a Mural was probably not as good as the Tidal Barracuda. Now the thing about Mural is that she can actually create a non-human. So the colorless soldier artifact creature token is not a human, which means that we can mutate onto her. The we can mutate onto her if she attacks. Is probably the better way to say it. However, there are a number of games where we just have no creatures in play, and we're having to play a creature and then immediately mutate onto it in order to combo off. And that's a case where Mural doesn't work. And part of the reason why I want it to be a protection creature of some kind is because of this replay right here. So this game, pretty high-powered game going on with lots of things happening. And in this particular moment right here, I have a win in hand. I have a creature that is not a human. I have the Chef's Kiss that can hit. It can hit Intuition, Snap, uh, Underworld Breach. It's got enough for me to basically go infinite. And allow me to recast Chef's Kiss, or more specifically, I could cast Treasonous Ogre, pay life, Twin Flame the Treasonous Ogre, and then Vadrok Chef's Kiss on the Treasonous Ogre, and then cast Twin Flame infinitely from the graveyard, and that would win the game. The problem is twofold. One, you notice my opponents, they have full grips of cards in their hand, and so we don't have a counter spell here, but we have a Beast Within that would blow up our mutate target. And then over here we've got traditional counter spell and a Doan's Veto. And it looks like also a Dream Fracture. And yeah, so there's like 4 counter spells, 5 counter spells over here. So we can't combo off. And this is a game where I sat there and I was like, I can attempt to jam my combo, but if one of them has a counter spell, and I felt like one of them did, then I would have no cards in hand and just kind of be dead in the water. And so for that reason, I was looking for more ways to add protection for when we're trying to go off, and that's why I'm currently testing out Tidal Barracuda. Now, Tidal Barracuda is risky. It is a card that, again, also is a 4 mana. Kind of doesn't do anything on its own. And I would say the main difference though is that Tidal Barracuda doesn't scream about to combo in the same way that a Grand Abolisher does. But I found that when you cast Mural, people treat it like a Grand Abolisher. They freak out, they come after you. And I've cast Tidal Barracuda a number of times in these test games, and some people attack me and they're like, what if he combos off? But a good number of players, especially in a situation like this, if I cast Tidal Barracuda here, I don't think people necessarily would attack me. Look at this developed board from all these people. There's threats abound. People are attacking each other for a good chunk of it. Tidal Barracuda here does not scream, kill me in the same way that Mural might, or at least, make people want to come after me. At least not from my experience. If anything, it makes people try to play at instant speed and play more mind games. Whereas Mural here, even casting a Mural here, there's not even a particularly good attack target. I mean, sure, maybe in this game in particular, if I had a Mural, I could attack into to Bicon. But if I was to attack with Mural into, like Big G over here, the Mural could get killed, which is not good. Not sure about Edric here, but I imagine if I was to cast a Mural and then pass, it would get Beast Within, whereas a lot of times I see that players won't Beast Within the Tidal Barracuda. It just doesn't have the same sort of reputation that Mural and Grand Abolisher do. And it's also not a creature that, because it's, Mural's a human, I would have to cast it and pass, whereas if this is the only creature in hand and I have enough mana, then I can cast it and I can, if it resolves, then I can go for the win right then and there. And that for me is pretty big. Having played this deck over 50 games now, it's pretty relevant. And so it's currently what I'm testing. So far I've been liking it. I agree it's a little bit risky, but it is a non-human that we can mutate onto that also is a built-in protection the turn it comes down. So another change I've made here is I've cut a snow-covered plains for snow-covered island. So previously, if you were looking at the coverage here, I didn't exactly have full coverage of blue, even though 21% of symbols in the deck are white, and then 22% are red. I'm overshooting most of these, and that's just because there'll be games where you want white, and then if you're running the exact ratio of white, you may not see it. But in my previous list, I was actually running half the deck is blue, but not half the mana base is blue, and so that ran into problems with High Tide. I believe I only had 6 islands in the previous iteration, and now we're up to, I want to say, 8 or 9. So High Tide actually feels a lot more relevant now, having cut the plains for the island. Originally the plains was in there just because I wanted a basic island and mountain and plains. It's normally been one of my policies to run a basic of each color that you need, just for stuff like the Prismatic Vista. However, as you can tell in this case, it's we're not exactly starving for mana, and we're almost like a red blue deck, for at least whenever we're trying to combo off or do any sort of combo lines. And so it's much better just to actually be able to cast High Tide and have more than 1 or 2 islands. And it's very possible that this mountain will get turned into a snow-covered island in the next iteration. So the third change here is Narset Part of Veils. Now this one might be a little bit controversial because initially when deck building, and I've seen a lot of Vadrok brews from this year that definitely run Narset. That's just because with Vadrok you're naturally wanting to run wheels. The issue with Narset that I found is that while it's very cool to cast Narset and then also cast a wheel in the same turn, I've actually done that several times and still lost the game. You don't really control when you end up drawing the Narset. There are plenty of tutors for the wheels, but Narset there's not that many tutors for, and so you can end up in a situation like this where you cast Narset. Let's say they don't counter Narset for whatever reason, and then you cast Wheel, and even if these people were to dump their hands, I mean they have such a commanding board state at this point that it's not even that good. It's not irrelevant, but it's just not that good, and definitely would get everyone to come after you, and you'd be hated. And for me, in this sort of situation, I would rather just have more protection to combo off, or more, have more consistency and be able to combo off, because this is a state in the game where people can actually just kill us because we don't have any blockers. And so that's a huge reason for cutting Narset. It's honestly never felt good when it's just been Narset. There have been some cases where playing it as Narset has felt good, but in most cases, playing it has just been pay 3 mana and then look at the top 4 cards of our deck and try to find a non-creature, and then it ends up getting killed next turn because we are a creature light deck. So I've replaced it with Mana Vault, and Mana Vault will make a lot more sense with the next edition here, Grasp of Fate. I've cut this out. It is a removal, a type of interaction. but it's also double white. And um, a lot of times what we're wanting is, again, more ways to combo. So cards that are interactive are necessary in the deck, just because there are strategies um, that are faster and strategies that are slower. And the main reason for any deck to run interaction is to counter opponents that are running some kind of faster strategy and to buy themselves time, or for a game where you don't have a window to go off and the game is naturally dragging along, you need to be able to interact with your opponents anyway. Um, or just games where you just draw the wrong cards out of your deck. That don't allow you to combo or do anything that your deck's mainly wanting to do. In that case, you definitely want interaction so that you can buy yourself some time. In this case, I've never felt like I've liked Grasp of Fate that much. We do have a number of bounce spells to deal with problematic non-creature cards like Rule of Law and Deafening Silence. But I feel like what we want more of is things that enable combos. And so here, Displacer Kitten and Mana Vault. I'm not sure if you've ever played with those two, but they are great. And I'm sure that at some point, whenever I actually go around to making the demonstration videos for this deck, that they will actually um, they'll have some games. There will be some games where I feature these two in action. Not even just Mana Vault specifically, but Displacer Kitten plus any number of artifacts in our deck is really sweet. Speaking of that, one of the things I added last time was Goldspan Dragon. Honestly, Goldspan Dragon has not been particularly good. For 5 mana, it hasn't really done what I've wanted. 5 mana, come down and attack and make a treasure has not really been great. I'm wanting to reduce our the CMC of our deck, and so I've added Emry, which is similar to the Hedron Crab. So Emry is going to mill us 4 cards. But the reason to add Emry is also because of Displacer Kitten, because we're wanting to now do combos that can basically make us go mana positive. Anytime we mill one of our artifacts, we would really like to be able to cast it so that we can begin doing Displacer Kitten combos. And so Emry is a much better include there. And then previously I had Storm-Kiln Artist. Storm-Kiln Artist. Hard to say that word. And I've just decided, instead of making something that is 4 mana and then kind of doesn't do anything, and then we pass, and Storm-Kiln Artist kind of screams combo piece. I would rather have just run the Treasonous Ogre and then be able to pay life and then generate red mana and potentially combo off that turn. And so that's the switch there. Heat Shimmer for Silence. So this one needs to be talked about because the 2 cards that actually can generate us a win, at least in the previous list, were Heat Shimmer and Twin Flame. And I don't think we actually had any other way to win the game, which is a bit of a problem with the previous list. So here, the main thing about Heat Shimmer and Twin Flame is that when I had them in hand, I didn't ever want to actually cast them. In most cases, these sorts of win con cards aren't that good outside of the combo. And so what we want to do is we want to make a deck that can generate some sort of combo that will not only find us our win con cards, but be able to use the win con cards the turn that we're going off in order to win. And so Twin Flame here is obviously the best one. It does the same thing as Heat Shimmer, except it costs 1 mana less. And so there's no reason to run both Heat Shimmer and Twin Flame. We don't necessarily want to see them. Twin Flame is the cheaper one, so that's the one we will run in case we need to, whatever reason, cast it for 2 just to throw it in the graveyard, which can make a difference considering how tight some of our mana loops are. And the other one is instead of actually running a Heat Shimmer, It's actually just better to run Brain Freeze. So here's our second way to win. We generate Infinite Storm, and then we cast Brain Freeze. If we don't have Infinite Storm and we want to, for whatever reason, put Brain Freeze in the graveyard, we can also cast it targeting ourselves, just to stock the graveyard. So Brain Freeze arguably isn't even that bad to cast in our deck. I mean, if you cast Brain Freeze, then someone's most certainly going to exile your deck, or not your deck, exile your graveyard, or dig for some way to exile it. It gets everyone's alarms up. But let's say you're on a turn where you are, you're almost certain you can combo off if you could put a ton of more cards from your deck into your graveyard. So let's say you don't have the stuff you need in your graveyard yet. If you can generate a high enough storm count, which can honestly be even like a storm count of 4, and that's not hard to do with now that we've got stuff like Displacer Kitten. You can Brain Freeze yourself, and then that can probably put what you need in the graveyard, and then proceed to combo off, and then generate the Infinite Storm, and then obviously with Vadrok you can cast Brain Freeze from the graveyard. So having a separate win con other than Heat Shimmer, as well as a card that doesn't actually feel as bad to cast, has been really nice. The other addition is Silence. So it's kind of the same lines as Tidal Barracuda. Be able to ensure that we can combo off on the turn that we're trying to go off is really important. Flusterstorm has been cut for an offer you can't refuse. I just feel like it's more flexible. Flusterstorm is good in the turn that you're trying to combo off because you can actually cast Flusterstorm and it will counter most things, just because the storm count is likely to be high by the time you're ready to go off. The issue I have with that is if someone casts something that is really strong against you, like say Teferi Time Raveler, which actually would stop you from trying to go off. So Teferi Time Raveler makes it so that we could only cast spells at sorcery speed. We would much rather have a way to stop that from ever entering the field. And so I found that an offer you can't refuse is more flexible. Allows us to counter things like Bolus the Citadel, other things that would give our opponents insane value, whereas Flusterstorm is good for the turn that you're comboing off, or maybe the turn that someone else is comboing off, but not so good if they're not comboing off, but they're about to do something that gets them like a full grip of cards, potentially counter spells in their hand, something that's an enabler. So you can't like Flusterstorm their Rhystic Study or their Mystic Remora. And that kind of creates a problem. Because if they draw multiple counter spells, let's say they stick a Mystic Remora and then you attempt to go off and they draw multiple counter spells. Sure, you Flusterstorm the first counter spell. And they can let that Flusterstorm resolve, and then they play another counterspell that they happen to have drawn into, and then now you have a problem. So that's kind of the reason I made the change here. I know that more competitive decks still run Flusterstorm just because when you are trying to go off, you want to guarantee that you can counter the counter that's coming after you. But in this case, we're not playing in competitive tier. And so players are playing a lot more value engines and ending up with board states kind of like this, and where they have full grips of cards from drawing so many cards. And so you actually want to be able to counter their card draw engines if possible, and then probably go in with protection pieces rather than banking on a single Flusterstorm, which honestly wouldn't even work here. Look how many counter spells they have in hand here. You want to prevent them from getting to this point rather than letting them get to this point and then just have a Flusterstorm. So another one is Demolition Field for Hall of Heliod's Generosity. Demolition Field, I honestly don't think blowing up opponents' lands has been particularly relevant to me. So, blowing up a Strip Mine, blowing up a Gaia's Cradle. I mean, all these things are allowing you to stop someone else from comboing off, but it's kind of the same reason why I'm cutting Grasp of Fate, is because instead of more interaction that slows down the game essentially for everyone, we would rather have cards that allow us to win the game faster. And so if we happen to mill Underworld Breach, or our breach gets countered, or we try to play Ristic Study and it gets destroyed. I found this land allows us to get back in the game by putting it back on top and then being able to recast it. Along the same lines of speed, Kykar Wind's Fury is gone. Similar to the same reason why Storm-Kiln Artist is gone. And it's been replaced with Jeweled Lotus. So a lot of times when we're trying to go for one of our combos, we need like 7 mana available. Jeweled Lotus allows us to use a card to reduce that mana count by 3, which is particularly relevant. With Underworld Breach, you can also cast it just by exiling 3, which also allows you to do things with, again, Displacer Kitten. So yeah, so far Jeweled Lotus has been a great swap in. Yusri Fortune's Flame needs some explanation here. It's a 3 mana creature that doesn't do anything in terms it comes down. And in my experience, it gets killed pretty quickly. Nobody really likes it to sit there. It kind of makes you a target on your back. And it I don't know. I've honestly never drawn cards from Yusri. And the times I've seen it in my hand and been like, okay, I think I can combo off, but it's definitely not going to be casting Yusri. It's going to be casting something else and mutating onto it. It's been too high. And so enough games have been played where I feel like this isn't something that I'm ever happy to see. And so it's getting the cut. So why Ephemerate? Ephemerate is something that I'm currently testing. There is a line here with Spellseeker. It's a Spellseeker line. And it may not be good enough for me to actually keep in this deck, but essentially the line here is you cast Spellseeker, which will let you search your deck for an instant or sorcery. You grab Ephemerate. You immediately cast the Ephemerate targeting Spellseeker, which creates another trigger when Spellseeker re-enters. Use that to grab High Tide, or Snap, honestly, depending on whatever you want, depending on the board situation. And then because Ephemerate has Rebound, on your next upkeep, Ephemerate is going to target Spellseeker again. It's going to blink Spellseeker and allow you to get the other piece that's missing, either High Tide or Snap, whichever one you didn't grab the first time. And with High Tide and Snap in hand, Spellseeker doesn't work because it's a human, but with High Tide and Snap, or even it can technically grab you a Twin Flame too. You already have essentially 2 of the cards needed to pull off this combo. With High Tide and Snap, you can actually go mana positive. Let's say you don't have Cloud of Fairies, but you have another non-human creature in play. With High Tide, enough islands to play, and Snap, you can go mana positive, essentially mutating Vadrok onto that non-human creature, snapping it back to untap 2 lands. And when you mutate Vadrok onto that non-human creature, you can actually cast High Tide from the graveyard, so that when you cast Snap and you untap 2 lands, now you're going super mana positive at this point, and can proceed to generate Infinite Storm and Infinite Mana as you play the creature again, mutate Vadrok back onto it, casting Snap with the Vadrok mutate trigger, untapping 2 lands, and because you had cast High Tide twice, hopefully you can go mana positive at that point, which will generate you infinite mana, and then hopefully infinite mana can allow you to win the game. And again, if you have High Tide or Snap in hand already, then you can have Spellseeker search up Twin Flame to just go ahead and potentially win the game here. So it is a combo that I'm trying. I don't know how much I like it exactly. I know some of the most competitive lists don't run Ephemerate, even though they do run the Spellseeker, and so it might be too cute. I know that doing this does tend to put a target onto Spellseeker, and so there's been at least one game where I cast Spellseeker, Ephemerated, grabbed the High Tide. Actually, I don't remember if I grabbed which one, but either way, once the Ephemerate went to exile, they immediately killed the Spellseeker, and so the Ephemerate had like no targets on my next upkeep, and so I wasn't able to grab the other card. And so it would have been the same thing as just casting Spellseeker and grabbing, either High Tide or Snap from the get-go, and not having to waste a card slot in my deck for the Ephemerate. But that is something I'm testing out. We'll see how much I like it. The other 2 I've already talked about down here. Manifold Insights is one that I'm still not sure if I should cut. As you can see here, I got pretty low on the number of cards in my hand. Um, Ultimately, we want more draw engines in the deck. We want more things that give us value. Um, and I'm still trying to piece together how, uh, you know, how we can how we can add more card advantage to the deck so that we don't end up in situations where other people are drawing more cards than us, and have full grips, whereas we do not and we can't combo off. But I'm hoping with protection pieces, being able to play a protection piece that we can mutate onto, as well as having something like silence, will allow us to combo off despite enemy card draw that we just for whatever reason can't get rid of, or that no other player at the table is getting rid of. And in some cases, I have missed Manifold Insights. I think that paying 3 mana to get 3 cards, even if your opponent picks whatever cards that they want to give you, I do feel like I kind of miss that in some kind of way. So there might be a case here in my testing where we ended up finding that Ephemerate is a little bit too cute, and we end up adding the Manifold Insights back in. And part of the reason why I originally cut it was because oftentimes, we hit one of these mana rocks, and so we get a bunch of cards we didn't necessarily want. However, because we now have Displacer Kitten, and that enables us to go mana positive with mana rocks, I actually don't feel like it's a bad thing for us to play Manifold Insights and for them to give us mana rocks. And so I might try to sneak it back in the list somehow. One thing I want to talk about now is that with the changes to the deck, we are no longer just a Chef's Kiss into Twin Flame or Heat Shimmer combo deck. We now have 3 different win cons. The first one is the traditional Twin Flame. You cast Twin Flame infinitely, make infinite haste to creatures, and attack. The second one is generate infinite Storm, cast Brain Freeze. And then the third one is because we have Displacer Kitten, we can actually flicker Dak Faden an infinite number of times, and then use the +1 on Dak Faden to mill our opponents out. So that gives us 3 different routes. Makes me feel a lot better about the deck, and so far I've really liked the way things are evolving. We are getting to the point where the game plan has pretty much proven that it works, and now we need to add consistency, as well as add protection for that game plan. And then similar to all my other lists, by the time that we reach the end, they're going to feel really tuned, and uh, every card in this list is going to feel really tuned and well chosen, and the deck's going to feel like it has this resiliency that makes it very difficult to ever be completely out of the game. So these are the changes that we have made at around 60-ish games. Again, some of them I'm still iffy on, like Ephemerate, and then possibly the Silence. But we are closing in on a potentially finished list. So stay tuned, and we'll see how things go.